The sentence landed like a slap, casual and cruel at the same time. He said he did not date widows, as if he were listing a food allergy or a harmless preference, unaware that life, listening quietly, was already preparing its response. Some words do not just reveal character, they summon consequences. And this one would change everything. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of empathy, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Stories like this travel farther when hearts carry them. Ethan Cole had always believed life was something you could control with the right rules. At 36, he had a stable job as a senior architect, a minimalist apartment overlooking the city, and a carefully curated list of do's and don'ts when it came to relationships. He believed emotional baggage was a choice, not a circumstance. He believed pain should be processed quickly and neatly, like closing a file after a project ended. And above all, he believed that widows came with shadows he did not want to live inside. To him, they represented unfinished love, permanent comparison, and a past that would always sit between two people at the dinner table. The blind date had been arranged by a colleague who swore Ethan was too rigid and needed someone who would soften his edges. The restaurant was warm and softly lit, the kind of place where people leaned closer without realizing it. Across from him sat Clara Bennett, a woman with calm eyes and a posture that suggested both strength and quiet weariness. She smiled easily, listened deeply, and spoke with a gentleness that felt earned rather than rehearsed. She mentioned she worked part-time at a community library and volunteered at a grief support center on weekends. She did not overshare. She did not perform. She simply existed, fully present. When the topic of past relationships came up, Ethan offered his usual polished summary of a long-term relationship that ended because it was no longer efficient. Clara paused before explaining that she had been married once and that her husband had passed away 4 years earlier. She said it without drama, without seeking sympathy, like stating the weather after a storm had already moved on. Something hardened in Ethan's chest. Without thinking, without filtering, he said the sentence that would haunt him later. He stated plainly that he did not date widows and that he preferred people who were fully available emotionally. The air changed. Clara's smile did not disappear, but something behind it dimmed, like a light being turned down rather than off. She nodded, thanked him for his honesty, and suggested they end the evening early. They parted politely. Ethan went home feeling oddly unsettled but convinced he had simply upheld his boundaries. He told himself honesty was kindness, even when it hurt. What he did not know was that life had already begun rearranging itself around him. 2 weeks later, Ethan received a call that fractured his sense of order. His younger sister, Lily, had been in a car accident. Her husband, Mark, did not survive. Lily did. Barely. The news arrived like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. He flew to their hometown immediately, stepping into a world that no longer followed rules or timelines. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and grief. Lily looked smaller than he remembered, wrapped in blankets that could not protect her from what she had lost. Over the following days, Ethan watched his sister move through shock like a ghost learning how to inhabit her body again. He saw how people spoke to her differently now, with careful voices and lowered eyes. He noticed how silence followed her into rooms. He watched her stare at Mark's phone, unable to bring herself to turn it off. And slowly, painfully, Ethan began to understand that widowhood was not an identity someone chose. It was something that happened to you, like an earthquake under your feet. He stayed longer than planned. He helped sort through paperwork, made meals that went untouched, sat beside Lily during sleepless nights when grief pressed too hard to be borne alone. One afternoon, she broke down while folding laundry, sobbing into one of Mark's shirts. Ethan held her, feeling useless and overwhelmed, realizing that no rulebook existed for this kind of pain. Love did not end neatly. It lingered, reshaped itself, demanded space. During one of his rare moments alone, Ethan found himself thinking about Clara. About the calm in her eyes. About how she had spoken of her loss without bitterness. About how easily he had dismissed a life he had never tried to understand. The memory of his words made his chest tighten with shame. Weeks later, after Lily had returned home and the immediate crisis had softened into a dull, constant ache, Ethan returned to the city changed in ways he could not yet articulate. He found himself less patient with shallow conversations, more sensitive to the quiet struggles of strangers. One Saturday, on a whim, he walked into a community library to donate books he no longer wanted. Behind the counter, organizing a stack of returned novels, was Clara. She looked up, surprised but composed. Time had not erased the gentleness from her face, but there was a guardedness now, a quiet boundary he recognized because he had helped build it. Ethan apologized, not with excuses, but with honesty stripped bare. He explained what had happened to his sister, how it had forced him to confront his own ignorance, how his words had come from fear rather than truth. Clara listened. She always listened. She did not rush to forgive, nor did she punish him with silence. She told him, calmly, that widows were not broken people waiting to be fixed. They were survivors learning how to live with absence. She said love did not disappear when someone died, it transformed, and there was room in the heart for more than one story. They began slowly. Coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into long conversations about loss, resilience, and the strange ways life teaches lessons long after we think we are done learning. Ethan learned that Clara's husband, Daniel, had been her first great love, but not her last chance at happiness. He learned that grief was not a wall but a landscape, one you could walk through together if you were brave enough. Months passed. Ethan watched Clara laugh again, not because grief had vanished, but because joy had found a place alongside it. He watched Lily, too, begin to rebuild her life, not by forgetting Mark, but by carrying his memory forward in quieter ways. Ethan understood then that love was not a limited resource. It expanded to meet the pain it encountered. Near the end of the year, Ethan stood with Clara at a winter charity event for the grief center where she volunteered. As he looked around the room filled with people who had lost and loved deeply, he felt humbled. Life had taught him a lesson he would never forget. The rules he once clung to had kept him safe, but they had also kept him small. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you've lost or someone you almost didn't let in, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and engage with it. Your support helps stories like this reach people who need them most. And before this story ends, we have a special request. In the comments, tell us about a moment when life taught you an unexpected lesson about love, loss, or second chances. Someone reading it might feel less alone. Ethan no longer said he did not date widows. He no longer reduced people to labels that made his world easier to manage. He had learned that love was not about competing with the past, but honoring it while choosing the present. And sometimes, the very thing we reject is the teacher we need most.